Hello again. Okay, so where are we? Well, last time I was here, I managed to get 2 coats of epoxy inside the aft and forward tanks. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to get the 3rd coat on, so that means, unfortunately, I'm going to have to sand them down because that epoxy is now completely cured and it's very shiny and very hard. So if I just paint another coat on top, it's not really going to stick very well. So those have to be sanded down. So that's going to take about an hour and a half to do all 3 tanks. So a bit of a pain, but just has to be done. So that's going to be the first job. I'm also going to cut the 2.5-inch hole in the mast collar for the mast, and then make sure the mast will fit through that. And then later on today and tomorrow, the tanks and then the mast collar are going to get some coats of epoxy. So the mast collar, I think, gets its first coat this afternoon, and the tanks get their final coat. And this will get 2 more tomorrow with the underside of the seats. So then everything will be ready next time to glue on the tops of all 3 tanks. And in theory, the boat will then be floatable. Okay, so I've got my 64mm hole saw and the hole saw arbor, which it fastens onto. So those are ready to go. What else do we have? I need to sand the centre board. So last time I glued on the strengtheners to the top of the centre board, so these 2 beams here. So now the centre board needs to be sanded inside because there is a bit of epoxy in here where I actually glued these posts. So where I glued these posts on, some epoxy is squeezed out and it's actually coated some of the wood, so that needs to be sanded down so that I can give it 3 proper coats of epoxy so that that will then be waterproof on the inside. Once that's all done, it can then be glued together and then it could be glued into the boat. So that's coming along nicely. So I think that's it. I've also decided I'm going to try and strengthen up that that forward frame. So once the mast collar goes in, this will be taking all of the weight of the mast. Any movement in the mast will be taken by this mast collar. And if the mast wants to go that way, this is going to start to twist. And it's going to be glued in to position, and it's going to have a flat piece of foredeck on top of it to hold it down. But I'm just going to put an extra little piece underneath. And I'm also going to actually put a little bit of glass tape underneath the port and starboard stringers on either side, just to give it that little extra bit of strength, because you know, it's one thing to take it on a lake in a nice kind of force 3, but if it gets on the sea and starts bouncing around, I think that's gonna put a lot of extra strain on this. And if the mast goes over, bow tank could get, you know, ripped to pieces, and I really don't want to see that. So I want to try and make it as strong as I possibly can before that top goes on. And then it's just going to be a question of getting the epoxy coats on. So yeah, so it's going to be the 3rd coats of epoxy in the 3 tanks, and then the 1st coat on the mast collar and on the centre board, and that should be it for today. So it's going to be a long day. It's like nearly 6 hours of work. So let's get going. Okay, so I thought I would just record this bit. So I bought the 64mm 2.5-inch hole saw. I've drilled a pilot hole through the mast collar where I want the guide drill to go. and I've actually drilled a hole through the foredeck as well to make sure it all matches up, and it does. So I'm now going to go ahead and drill the hole. I have to do it slowly. Oh. It's starting to smell slightly burny there at the end, but and the particles went from light wood colour to very dark, like they were burning. I'm not going to touch it in case because it's probably going to be really hot. Right, so it does smell slightly burned, and so there is the mast, the hole for the mast and the mast collar. Okay, just a quick summary of what I've done so far. I've sanded inside these aft tanks and inside the forward tank, both with the sander, but it's quite big so it doesn't get into all the corners and it doesn't fit in quite a lot of places actually, so that does about half the work, and then the other half I've had to do it by hand, so just rubbing down to get rid of the glossy surface. I've then hoovered them out, dusted them down, hoovered them out, and then wiped it down with a damp cloth to make sure there's no dust left. And I've also cut now 2 pieces of fiberglass tape, which I'm going to use to strengthen the stringers under the foredeck. And I've also cut a strengthening piece to go under the foredeck as well. and I have also cut the hole in the mast and the foredeck. So this was ready for its first coat of epoxy as well, which is to go on the underside and inside the hole. So it's all ready for epoxying. So I've got about an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4 to go, and I need to mix 4 lots of epoxy and get all of these tanks basically finished off. All right, better get on with it then. Okay, so now I'm mixing some more epoxy. It's a 2-minute minimum mix time to make sure it's evenly mixed. Applying that to the port aft tank, making sure I get into every corner, including the stringers at the top. Make sure every bit of wood is coated. There's a bit left over, so now I'm going to mix it with some thickener so that I can use that to glue on the strengthener piece on behind the forward bulkhead to give that a bit of extra strength. Then I'm finished that, so now I need to mix some more epoxy again. Second batch, 2 more minutes mixing. So this is now going into the starboard aft tank. Using a brush here because it's such a confined space, it's difficult to get a roller in there. And now I'm putting the tapes, so the fiberglass tapes are going underneath the stringers in the forward tank to strengthen these forward stringers to make that foredeck very, very strong and make sure it can support the mast even in some dodgy, bouncy conditions. Okay, so that's the end of another video. Remember, if you'd like to receive notifications when new videos are posted, then subscribe by clicking on the link down below. And if you've enjoyed watching the video, just please leave a like. Cheers.